Thank you. Thank you so much, Volker, and thank you for this beautiful introduction and warm welcome. And I'm very happy to be here. And I want to take you on a ride with me on what happens when green technology meets reality, or on the environmental impacts of the sharing economy, the digital sharing economy. And I want to cut the suspense right away and get to the bottom line. The short answer on what are the environmental impacts of the sharing economy is it depends. It really depends. It can be better, it can be worse. And while we might have this fuzzy feeling towards sharing and assume that it's environmentally preferable, that's not always the case. There is nothing inherently more environmental on digital sharing. And now that we got to the bottom of this answer, we can go back and try to understand why did we get to this answer, and more interesting, what are the reasons or what are the features that shape this, whether this is preferable or not to conventional consumption, which is usually private ownership. I will start by presenting the research team that did this paper with me. My name is Tamar Meshulam, and thank you again for the presentation and welcome. I did this also together with Dr. Diana Ivanova and my advisor, Dr. Tamar Makov. And this is our joint work also with Dr. Sarah Goldberg. So sharing is not a new phenomenon. We've always shared. Just the other week, I shared like a designer dress to my friend who went to a wedding. We've always shared between friends, between family, but digital sharing has allowed this to expand, to become a social phenomena, going from 15 billion in 2014 to 130 and expected to reach 600 billion in 2027. There are a lot of sharing platforms throughout every consumption domains. Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, Rent the Runway. I'm sure you've heard these names. There are also less well-known consumption domain platform and organizations, such as Olio, which is a peer-to-peer platform to share excess food. They name themselves the Tinder of food waste. So if you have food that you're not going to eat, you can post it and someone will come and eat it. And this will enable people to have access to healthy food that would otherwise go to waste. There is also Tulo, which enables a building to share products that are used less frequently. And in an essence, this is the premise for environmental benefits within the sharing economy, increasing underutilized goods and services. So a regular car is parked 95% of the time. If we can share it among other people, we will increase its utilization rate and maybe reduce demand for new cars. And this move from ownership to usership is all about increased resource efficiency and reducing demand for new products. And this is the big promise of digital sharing. But we also know that digital sharing can also reduce resource efficiency, as we have seen with the bike sharing boom in China that had hordes of unused bikes as platforms swamped the cities. And we also know that sharing can also displace more environmental behavior, as we see Uber and Lyft increase traffic delays in San Francisco. And when we have these two very contradicting images of increased use intensity versus unexpected environmental impacts, we try to understand which is the real image. When is digital sharing preferable to traditional consumption? And more interesting, under which features? Okay, and this was our question that we set up to answer using a systematic literature review of existing empirical papers. So only papers that look at empirical results. There are a lot of papers saying what is the perception of the sharing economy and what are the business models. But we were looking only for papers that are reporting actual impacts of the sharing economy. We started from over 2,200 papers, and we narrowed it down to 166 relevant papers. And what made this a little bit tricky was that each paper had a very different matrix or came from a different product. So we had global warming potential of a single use of a t-shirt, or a lifelong use of a stroller, or perhaps bike impacts per kilometer, or something completely different, looking at how the transportation behavior of people changed as they used ride-hailing. And we had to somehow consolidate these 166 papers that all had different angles toward the subject. And the way that we chose to do it was using a traffic light approach. So we would look at the reported results of the paper and just look whether this paper thought that the digital sharing or the sharing economy is preferable, or is it worse, or is it maybe neutral or mixed? That would be in the end. So we had like a 3-point Likert scale for each paper. And then for each paper, we also looked at different features. So we could look at the sharing domain. Is it accommodations? Is it transportation? Is it good sharing? Whether it's peer-to-peer or is it business to customer? Is it for free, for pay? And we also looked at features of the research itself. Did this research look at displacement? Displacement meaning what would otherwise this user would do. So if I'm not taking my Uber, what would I have otherwise done? Would I walked? Would I stayed at home? Would I take the bus, my car? That would be displacement. And did this research look at platform operations? So that could be different things for different sharing domains. And we'll discuss that a bit later. What were the system boundaries? What was the type of impact? Was it more environmental? Was it consumption change? And then once we had this set of features, and we could start analyzing it and seeing how does the different features play along. Okay, the results are 52% of papers find sharing to be preferable, 33% find it to be worse, and 15% have mixed results. But actually, these results are not interesting because what it says that it depends, it's complicated. And this is what we started out with. So we have some information, but not a lot of new information. So let's dig a few layers deeper. So one thing that we can look at is how the literature changed over time. And you can see in green preferable and yellow mixed or the same, and then red sharing is worse. You can see that there is an increase, a very large increase with sharing, with researching the environmental impacts of sharing. And also there is an increase in the number of negative results that we are getting. And now we can try to segment it. Where do we see these results? So I'm going to show you a scary graph. Bear with me. Now this is based on what is the domain, what is the impact by domain, and let's go one by one. So if we look at goods sharing, we have quite limited number of papers. There is a wide range of products going from food, apparel, electronics, to libraries. And in most of them, sharing is preferable. It increases the use intensity. Maybe it depends. Maybe there is some impacts are nullified by added transport or operation, but mostly there is a very positive picture. And If we continue to accommodations, again, a very small research stream, this is something like 8 papers, predominantly Airbnb, predominantly negative, finding mostly negative results as Airbnb reshapes sometimes the overall apartment market. As much as 5% of overall apartments are converted into vacation apartment, which in essence reduces the use intensity. Instead of having an apartment where a family lives, we now have a vacation apartment which is mostly empty. Now, when we move to shared transport, and specifically cars, we have 3 different modes. We have car sharing, which is me picking up a car and being a driver and driving from place to place, either free-floating or station-based, and that's mostly positive results. We can see that we have ride-hailing, that would be Uber, Lyft, someone being a driver to me, where we expect that the platform will allocate resources in an efficient manner, but that's not efficient enough to account for dead-end miles where drivers just looking for people and the multitude of people joining. And then we have ride sharing, which is me taking a ride, joining someone who's already going there. Those are mostly theoretical platforms. So in theory, if I would have this platform, how would it look like? And it's mostly positive. And if we continue to micromobility, we have a lot of papers on bike sharing, which I will dive deeper in a second, and mostly positive due to displacement, to the displacement or assumption of displacing cars. And then we have scooters, shared scooters, which are predominantly negative. Most of the time, because scooters do not displace cars, they displace walking, they displace public transportation, and the fact that they have an electric engine and are made of steel means that producing them is quite environmentally intensive. Now, if we look at different results based on whether the paper took into account the added platform operations, we can see that when a paper excluded this, the results tended to be much more positive to the left. When looking into the added platform operations, it was much more negative. So that might be dead-end miles within ride hailing. It might be me moving the tent from person to person. And for apparel, let me try to see if it, I hope that you can hear this.
This is what happens when your RTR returns arrive back at RTR. Garments, plastic, and hangers are taken out of the bag and sorted. Fun fact, all plastic sent back to RTR is recycled. Garments are transported, sorted by a robotic arm, and taken to cleaning to be quality checked. If an item needs a little more TLC, it goes to alterations and spot cleaning. This is where things get steamy, literally. With the exception of delicate items, every garment goes through the steam tunnel. Garments are then sorted throughout the warehouse to be packed up for you. And voila, your orders are packed up with love and care by Team RTR and shipped directly to you.
So as you can see, this is very different than me loaning a dress to a friend. When I'm loaning a dress to my friend, we're meeting, I'm giving her the dress, maybe she'll dry clean it, maybe she'll... There's just so many operations that are not needed as opposed to this commercialized process that has more impacts, and we tend not to think about it. When we think about it, it's like, oh, sharing. And I think that even more so when you take platform operations, sorry, let's see. No, that's not what I want. Okay. When you take platform operations, and you can also look at displacement. What does sharing displace? And this interaction is also very important. So I'm going to dive a little bit into bike sharing. This is a very developed literature, the environmental impacts of bike sharing. There are 43 papers from multiple regions, including China, US, Europe. And I want to show you how what the paper includes will have an impact on the expected outcome. Now, I have here 4 quadrants. The top left includes papers that exclude platform operations and do not look at displacement. So displacement would be what I would use instead of taking my bike. Would I walk? Would I use my car? And then platform operations would be bike rebalancing. So at the morning, all the bikes are neatly spread out throughout the city. And then after I take them, all of them are maybe in train stations, maybe centrally. And then there's a little car going around and redistributing throughout. So whether platform operations are included, that would be the top right quadrant. Then if we have displacement but no platform operation, that would be the bottom, and both, that would be the bottom right. And I'm going to give you like an example from each paper, so you will have to believe me that it's a representative. And if you don't, please go and read the paper and see for yourself. So if we don't look at displacement or platform operations, shared bikes, privately owned bikes are more or less the same. When we look at platform operations, then we can see that private bikes are preferable to shared bikes due to 2 reasons. The first, and I'm really sorry about the resolution of this graphic, the first would be the bike rebalancing in yellow. And then the second would be building the infrastructure for the docks, the steel and the wood and the plastic that is needed. But for bike sharing, we also have another, okay, so platform operations worse. But we have another venue for environmental improvements, and that would be displacement. We expect bikes to displace cars, to displace taxis, public transportation. And you can see that when looking at displacement, bikes are preferable because they displace in green cars, in in light blue taxi. So if we only look at displacement, then we have a very positive look on the environmental impacts of bike sharing. But when we merge the two, there are papers that look at this, and you can see the dotted line, that would be the break-even point. And on the x-axis, you have the percentage of bike sharing trips that replace car from 0 to 100%. And you can see that more or less the break-even point is around 30%. And if we can have 30%, that would be good. More than that, it will be environmentally beneficial, and less, it will be less. And many papers report that 20% of bike shares are displaced by cars. So that would mean that if we take both platform operations and displacement, the image is not so clear. It might be neutral, it might in some cases be good, it might be bad. So the reality of digital sharing is more complex than we initially think about it. I want to share with you another interesting finding, and that's that environmental impacts vary by platform valuation size. So if we look at how much money the platform is worth, and this was only for papers that we can know what was the platform and how much it's shared, you can see that small platforms up to 1 million, even up to 1 billion, environmental impacts tended to be more positive than negative. And then over 1 billion, that would be that would be Uber, that would be Airbnb, are predominantly negative. So we can think of several reasons why that might be. One reason could be that platforms that are similar to the conventional consumption, such as taxi or hotels are the one that's growing, and these are the ones that are less beneficial. Other reason can be that as part of the scaling up, something changes along the way. And I want to share with you this email that was just posted in some social media from two Airbnb founders, from Joe to Brian. Like, I thought of a way of making a few bucks. Let's turn our place into a designer bed and breakfast. So we have an extra room, we're gonna share it, we're gonna increase our utilization, make some bucks, it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's like a marginal add-on, but as time goes by, and that's not a marginal behavior, that's the mainstream, we're seeing other behaviors such as someone building this new hotel for one family out in the snow. And instead of Airbnb displacing hotels, now Airbnbs or people for Airbnb are building hotels. So let me try to wrap this up with a few key takeaways from this talk. What I hope that I have convinced you is that consumer behavior really matters. Sharing might be beneficial, but we have to make sure it's not displacing more environmental consumption modes. Also, sharing can drive added consumption. It can trigger rebound effects. And now we have people advocating private jet Uber, which, you know, I might be sharing a private jet, but it's a private jet. That's not going to be, not going to provide any points for the environment. Platform behavior matters. We don't always increase use intensity. This is true for Airbnb. It's also true for ride hailing, where the number of people in the car driving to the same location matters more than other variables. Operation add a substantial impact. And also moving from marginal to mainstream might change how this platform behaves. And I'd like to conclude by quoting US Climate Envoy John Kerry. And he just told, I mean, it was 3 years almost, he told the US that they don't need to change their behavior because 50% of carbon reductions that are needed to get to net zero will come from technologies that have not yet been invented. And the more we are depending on green, unknown technologies, we need to make sure that we take into account their broader system-level impacts. And we need to get sure that we're getting to where we're aiming for. Thank you very much.